Welcome to Wizards of the Tower Roleplay, where we talk everything RPGs, tabletop, and possibly even computer role-playing game. I'm Delaney.
And I'm Tom.
And I've been DMing since '79.
I'm kind of a newbie, only since 2007.
Which actually is not that compared to some people, that's quite a while, because you started back in 3.5.
I did. I started in 3.5. Sometimes I thought that we had originally looked at 3.0. And I remember you had a lot of 3.0 books.
Mm-hmm.
But I do remember actually you handing me the 3.5 rule book and looking through it. And so that I really consider myself starting in 3.5. Now, one thing we'd like to talk about is, and of course I've never DM'd. I'll tell you why maybe a little later. But Delaney has DM'd a lot. And so what we'd like to start with is how Delaney would set up a typical game session.
That's a great question. Chaotically.
But it all comes together.
It all comes together. So I formulate ideas in my head for the campaign that I'm running. Sometimes maybe even a one-shot. Typically it's not a one-shot. Typically it is a campaign that I like to run. But I come up with an idea, and I've got a gaming world that I've been gaming out of since probably the 80s that I started, and just putting little pieces and parts together and all stored up in this noggin of mine, and eventually started putting it down onto electronically. So that way I had all that information and I could be more consistent. How do I set it up? Well, once again, you kind of come up with an idea, whether you're sitting there watching a movie, or you're reading a book, or somebody says something, or you're listening to some heavy metal, which Tom and I both are big metalheads, and you hear something that just kind of gives you an idea. And then you just kind of run with that. Now, the current campaign I'm running is a kind of it's kind of an not post-apocalyptic, it's apocalyptic. In a fantasy game. And what is going on is there's a never-ending winter that is set about the world. And why is this never-ending winter happening? And that's what the party is out to figure out. So I'll start off most of my adventures the very first time. I'll write out a lot of the very first scenario of what's going on and step by step. And once that is done, I actually start doing more off the top of my head and kind of running. I'll have some ideas in my head of what I want to do. But as they say, the best laid plans of a DM are always ruined by a player.
Yeah.
And you can try and steer your players, but players can kind of get resentful about that. I remember a specific adventure we went on that was an adventure path. And it was a very specific thing that we had to do, and nobody in the party wanted to do it. So you kind of have to plan around that and give your characters their nuggets, and they decide where they want to go, and then you kind of run with that. So it kind of makes it a little tougher to plan, but you kind of come up with what might be going on. In fact, in this adventure, there was someplace that I was hoping they would go, and they decided to go someplace else. So I just kind of ran with it.
Well, one thing you have to keep in mind, folks, is that 9 out of 10 of the adventure scenarios that we've played with in Delaney's games are homebrew campaigns. They're not canned campaigns. And we call them homebrew because basically the DM comes up with them themselves. And Delaney is really, really good at creating homebrew. Now, we'll talk a lot about that maybe in another episode, because that's really an entire episode in of itself, dealing with homebrew campaigns.
Yeah, coming up with a homebrew and what do you want to do and creating with it.
Yeah, and the thing is when you start with a homebrew campaign, you've got to figure out all the different scenarios where people are going to go and who they're going to encounter, and what their adventure path is going to be, and what their main quest is going to be. And of course, everyone, when you talk about role-playing games, it's always a quest. I'm out on a quest to do this or to do that. And as you do your quest, you're going to run into some creatures, whether they be low-level creatures or high-level creatures. We call them, villains or adversaries or whatever. And Delaney is actually really good, in my opinion, of matching the strength of the villain to the strength of the party, to the levels of the party. And how do you come up with that?
So in Pathfinder, and even in Dungeons and Dragons, there's kind of a formula, or CR, challenge rating.
Challenge rating.
And challenge
CR.
rating is, I mean, you can have there. It can fit in, and sometimes it doesn't. Especially when you have a larger party, then your CR rating will start to increase, and then you have to start throwing more monsters at the party.
So give me an example of a CR1.
An orc.
An orc.
I think it's actually a CR half.
Okay, what's like a CR2 then?
Oh gee, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but maybe a bugbear or something. I can't really think of it off the top of my head without looking. A lot of times I'll look at a chart, but once again, when it comes to my sessions, and figuring out what to throw at my party, is I kind of look at what my party has done and how they've handled themselves, and what I feel that they can handle.
And the thing is you have to somehow balance that out, right?
Right.
You can't have a challenge rating 5 monster, and sometimes we call the villains monsters. A challenge rating 5 monster attack your level 2 or 3 characters who oftentimes don't have adequate weapons, armor, or magic.
Actually, you can, because the CR of the party depends on what's going on. So let's say you have 6 party members.
Okay.
And let's say they're all second level.
All right.
So you add them all up, and then you divide by the party member.
Okay.
Come up with an average. So that would typically be 2. But now that you've got 6 party members, you have to increase it to, say, a 3.
Okay.
And a 5 or 6 would be a pretty tough fight for a level 2 party. But you can also throw in a bunch more monsters to kind of change all that. It's kind of a complex system that the books do get into and talk about.
Well, I didn't know there was a formula that you should work off of and divide it by the number of characters. I just thought you went by the level of the characters in the fight.
Kind of.
But you add them all together.
Right.
Okay. So let's say you have 6 second level characters. They have basic weapons, basic armor, a little bit of magic, maybe first level spells or cantrips. So what would be your typical villain? And let's say you've got a mix. You've got at least one cleric, maybe a dwarf, a fighter, maybe an elf, maybe an apprentice wizard, something like that. What would be a villain or a monster you would throw at someone like that?
So something like that, you could actually throw probably 8 or so orcs at them.
Okay.
Or
Goblins maybe?
Probably a dozen goblins.
Okay. And the number of the monsters then has a lot to do with
Right.
it too. How many you want to throw at them?
Right.
Now, one thing I remember is we get into fights. Sometimes we end up fighting like an owlbear.
Yeah.
And they've got their slash attacks and their biting attacks, and it can really make mincemeat out of a party, especially if the party doesn't have a lot of healing.
Certainly can.
Yeah. So, what do you think about DMs who overmatch their parties, and they overmatch them with more powerful monsters?
I kind of look at that as a dungeon master who's trying to do a TPK. Now, what is TPK?
Total party kill.
And I, as a DM, don't believe in a TPK. In fact, on our Discord server that we have, one of our players was throwing out there about Matt Mercer and killing off players, and maybe I ought to kill more players off. And I kind of chuckled about that and said, you want more deaths? I can definitely do that, but let it be known, I don't kill the players. Players kill players.
And, folks, we'll get into this more in another episode when we talk about almost exclusive TPK campaigns and DMs that we've known who've done that. And there's a philosophy behind it, and I think, but there's also philosophy against it, and it comes from the DMs, and it all depends. And Delaney has a lot of experience in DMing, and in many ways is a very fair DM, but of course we've come across some that aren't fair.
Right. Yeah, we have a friend of ours that used to game with us that would come in, and every game session he would talk about how TPK the group, and to me, that takes away the fun of the players. Now, maybe the players like that, but I know that's kind of frustrating to players to be wiped out every game session. Having to recreate a new character and come up with a character that you like and have a backup character. That gets pretty frustrating, and it looks bad as a DM if you're killing them off every time. Now, I'm not saying that characters shouldn't die in a game, I look at it kind of as a heroic thing, and kind of look at Lord of the Rings and how many of them survived. Boromir was the only one killed off.
Well, yeah, there's that. Well, and the thing is now, a lot of it has to do with the roll of the dice.
Right.
How well you roll. Whether or not it's going to be a good roll or a bad roll. And some people's dice are not hot on a night; they're real cold, and they keep blowing shots and stuff. So when that happens, and this is always a really touchy subject to bring up with DMs and with players, but I think if we're just going to touch on it now, okay, because we're going to do an episode on this later. But I would ask you, and you can decide how you want to answer this. Would you admit to fudging rolls to saving NPCs or saving characters?
Yeah, I've done it.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of DMs have done it.
In fact, our last game session was a one-shot for Samhain, Halloween.
Yeah.
And the group came to me and said, well, hey, it's Halloween and we want to do a one-shot. Now, whether it's one-shot with our same characters or it's new characters. And I started thinking, what can I do? So I throw a little haunted adventure at them.
It's fun.
That I probably could have TPK'd the group.
Yeah.
My dice were so hot, I had a monster that hit four crits in a row.
Sometimes you can't believe it. You just can't believe it, but it happens.
And it's funny.
I guarantee it happens.
And it's funny because I thought, well, I'm not going to use this dice. I'm going to change to a dice. And sure enough, as soon as I changed to a different dice, I rolled a couple more crits that were confirmed.
Sometimes you're just hot. There's no way you can get around it. Yeah.
In fact, that monster actually would have killed off the NPC, but I didn't quite want to have him die yet. So
yeah,
I had something happen.
Well, the game itself is kind of an adventure set in the Northlands and the forest, and we have some adventures characters, a fighter, and this is a fighter named Frostwolf, right?
Right.
Yeah. A lot of these characters have Nordic names because it's kind of a
Nordic Celtic
adventure. If you know a little bit about Pathfinder and you look at Galarian, is it Galarian?
Yeah, Galarian.
Yeah, up in the north.
Pathfinder. Yeah.
In Pathfinder, you have the land of the Mammoth Lords and stuff like that. A lot of that is sort of Vikingish, Celtish, Pictish kind of a scenario, that kind of a setting, and they have names like Ulfgar and and Lothar and things like that. And so this character's name is Frostwolf, and he's a fighter.
He's big and strong. He's a dumb farm kid, but
he has a great sword, and he'll be happy to show you his sword. Innocently show you his actual sword. If you ask him that kind of thing. That's how we role play him. He's kind of not too smart, but he's all heart and very courageous.
And probably the reason I didn't kill him off is there was an encounter you guys had, which was a random encounter that was a magical, kind of a chaos thing.
Yeah.
And the chaos thing of it is it would kill him, but he would come back to life. And I saw the disappointment in the party when they convinced him to drink of this magical water, and it killed him because of the randomness.
Yeah.
And they were crushed. They thought they'd killed off Frostwolf. So fortunately, within that random encounter, it wasn't designed to actually kill him off. And he's got some other problems because of it. But I decided, now's not the time for Frostwolf to die. Now, he might eventually, but his time wasn't quite right.
Well, okay, so that leads us to this other part I want to talk about, and that's reading the emotions of your players. If they become invested in a certain character, do you look at that character and say, well, this is a character, it's an NPC, but it's a player favorite. Maybe, I want to be a little careful with this character so we don't kill this character off and ruin the continuing spirit of the game.
And so you'll hear DMs, are all for killing off players, but I, as a DM, and maybe I'm a softie, but there was actually a question at a game that another tabletop game that I was playing, not an RPG, but a tabletop miniature game, BattleTech, that I was playing with some friends.
Yeah.
And one of our players mentioned about me being the DM, and one of the other players said, well, is Delaney a hard DM, a fair DM, a bad DM? And he said that I was a fair but tough DM. Because I will hit hard, but I'll take you just to that level of Not quite dead yet.
I'm not dead yet.
Not dead yet.
You will be soon.
So, you know, I just don't have... I don't like killing off characters, but if a character... if somebody does something really foolish and dumb, I guess you could say, that... You know, it'll roll, and we've got some stories on that. There was a dwarf in the first campaign that I was running with you.
Yeah, Redstone Keep.
Redstone Keep.
Yeah,
that was a homebrew, and a dwarf barbarian. He went running down the stairs into this room all by himself because they saw a monster.
Yeah,
and he went chasing after it, and they lured him into the room, cut his route of escape, and sliced him and diced him and made kibble bits, knoll snacks out of him.
Yeah.
And grabbed his body and dragged it off because they knew that, you know, the party, they'd kind of been watching a party that they could heal. So they prevented that.
Yeah.
And then there was a thief in that same adventure later on who an inn was getting attacked and they were defending the inn and he got himself cut off and got himself killed. And he was quite devastated because he really had a lot invested in that character.
Wow.
But, you know, it was at the point at that time that he'd gotten himself foolishly cut off from the rest of the group and had gone charging in to try and do something heroic and had died. And that same player later on in another campaign decided to go swimming in a deep, deep, deep well and drowned.
Yep.
Now with him, he actually got to come back, but he had a curse affected to him, and the character decided he didn't want to live with that curse.
Yeah.
So, and he was quite upset when he actually lost another character later on that I was trying to kill him. But it's like, I don't kill the players will kill the players. If you do something foolish, get yourself cut off, and you can't escape, it's going to happen. So it's an unfortunate thing. I don't like killing off players, but it'll happen.
Well, I mean, if you played the game long enough, you've got a whole list of anecdotes about characters that you've had that have died or done stupid things, or characters that you know in the game who've done stupid things and died.
Well, there was a guy who had the dog, and the dog went charging into the enemy, and the enemy took it down and was going to coup de grace the dog, and that player got really upset.
Yeah, for some reason he was overly invested in that dog, even though that dog was not a familiar. It was just a companion dog. And, I mean, I understand, you know, you probably have love for your dog, but of course it's just a game. But, you know, that adds, you know, to the emotional context of players in a game. And role-playing games, ROLE and ROLL, you know, they can foster a sense of emotion amongst the players where they start to bond together as a group. And they start to have an emotional investment in their characters that they play. And, you know, because they take on the role of the thief or the cleric or the wizard. And they face life and death situations. And I think, and I'm recalling this because this is something from quite a long time ago. I remember the old Tom Hanks movie, Mazes and Monsters.
Right.
And I think the one thing that caused one of the players to flip out is, and this is from the TV show, is he jumped down into a pit or something like that, and they thought that he saw a glimmer of gold, but it turned out to be a spike, and he impaled himself on the spike and died. Wasn't it something like that?
Well, that might have been in the adventure himself.
That was in the adventure itself, yeah.
Right.
But see, that caused one of the players to flip out because his character died, and he was heavily invested in that character, and he flipped out, and that's...
Or no, he was looking for somebody or something, I think. But it caused him to flip out, which was...
And then, of course, that caused, like, his break from reality or whatever, and, you know, the whole Mazes and Monster thing and all that stuff. So, you know, people can become heavily invested in their characters, and we'll talk about that later on when we start, when we do a couple episodes about creating characters and how you can be, you know, you can identify with your characters in that sense.
Yeah, coming up with backgrounds and other things. But that's quirks and whatever. But that's a future episode.
Yeah.
So at this time, I think it's time to sign out. I'm Delaney.
And I'm Tom.
And may all your adventures be epic. And keep on role-playing.
Keep on rolling. Thanks, folks.